I'm just kind of seeing what's present here. I'm feeling a lot of feelings today. I wanted to put this out there that sometimes I think maybe we'll talk and record and and then decide not to use it.
Why not?
Um,
It's fine.
I just, well, we've talked and when we've talked about this in the past, you it sounded like you would be maybe more uncomfortable with this than me, but like just getting really personal. And and that sometimes I actually do want to share that publicly, and totally fine if you don't want to, but I want to sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, but other times it just depends.
Yeah. There are certain things that I'm okay with sharing, personal stuff, not
Mhm.
everything. And especially when it gets to and I'd be curious to get your thoughts, especially when it gets to like, oh well, this happened in my childhood, and my parents were like this and did XYZ. And the reason I'm really hesitant to do that um is because first of all, they didn't ask to be talked about on a podcast, in
Mhm.
public. And I think there should be a level of discretion and respect and uh, confidentiality when it comes to that. Like, I don't want to bias anybody uh, when in regards to my parents or
Uh-huh.
family, because everyone's doing the best they can, with exceptions. But generally speaking, people are doing the best they can with the level of understanding, maturity, whatever their upbringing was. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It that um hit a couple spots for me where I was just like, huh, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Because some of the stuff, uh, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit of two minds. It's like I want to be able to talk about it because it's what makes it relatable, and it's like it adds a lot of context, I think, and just to as a well, I like to use myself as an example, and so I think it's useful. But then, yeah, just thinking about having something out in the public sphere, and it's pretty private, and yeah, they didn't ask to be talked about. And I don't know, I guess for me there's like a balance somewhere, and I just don't know what it is. And but
Yeah.
it's like I will talk about experiences I had with them, but I think I'll do my best to present it in a pretty um, objective way of just like
Right.
this is what happened, and this was my interpretation of it, and to not demonize them. Um,
No. Yeah.
yeah, because it's not for me, it's not like they're not like horrible people. If they were,
Right.
then I would demonize them. But
Right. Just screw it, man.
yeah, but like,
Come on the bus.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. It's interesting. And that's one example of, we might get into the flow of a conversation, and then I might like share some stuff that crosses a line, and then, well, we might not have to pull the whole episode, but like at least edit some things out potentially.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like no, I understand like the whole it is useful. It gives so much context. And I feel like people are missing lots of context if I don't talk about it or if you don't talk about it. So I also understand that as well. So that I am torn.
Mhm. And it's so I just don't like the separation that exists a lot of times with therapists. And to be fair, I haven't listened to a shit ton of therapy podcasts, um but just that people stick to these conversations like it's all theory and it's educational, and it's like removed the personal element. um it's like, for example, I see these conversations in some of the therapy Facebook groups. I saw one just a couple of days ago. They were talking about the importance of supervision. That's, I think they were saying that that's what makes a therapist good, is good supervision. And and I think good supervision is great. Um, but it's just, again, it's removed from the personal element. The only psyche I have access to is my own. And so if I want to understand how it works, the best way to understand that is to engage in my own healing process and have good guidance with that. That's a different type
Mm.
of supervision.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think, and this is what I hope to do in my own supervision once I'm able to do that, is is I want it to be I want it to be very, very heavily focused on introspective practice. And so it's like focused on, yeah, of course, working with clients, but it's like it's all about how do you apply what you know inside with your clients.
Mm. Well, let me play devil's advocate, and then
Yeah.
because you also opened up another door, which is an interesting topic of concern. So devil's advocate, yes, perhaps yes, that your own personal work and introspection is important up to a degree, but there's no evidence to suggest that working on yourself will lead to better therapeutic outcomes for your client. Uh, yeah. So what if I were to play devil's advocate here?
Well, one, I don't know if that's true. I haven't scoured the research to look for that, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that that's true because I don't think it's easily measured. So I don't think there probably hasn't been adequate studies done on that. Somebody in that critical thinking psychotherapy group posted a study yesterday, I think, that was talking about differences in, oh my God, dude, you're sitting on my headphones. Jeez. Um, differences in therapeutic outcomes. And I guess this study, I didn't actually read it. I just read his little comment on it. But I guess it was saying that the research shows that there's no difference, like experience doesn't make a difference.
That's right.
So whether you're fresh out of grad school or you're 20 years out of grad school, that the therapeutic outcomes are relatively the same.
Yeah.
And then there was like maybe a 5% difference when it came to, I think it was like interpersonal skills or communication skills, something like that. And that's
For
what
experience.
for
Oh, what
therapeutic
made
outcomes.
got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
higher interpersonal skills lead to higher therapeutic outcomes. I can believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what it was saying. But how the fuck do you measure someone's inner work? Um,
I mean, you could again. I'm no researcher, but I'm
Mhm.
sure they have some kind of process to do it, and I get it. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah. And then it depends because just be so yeah, it does get nuanced. And I think I said this in my comment wherever, whatever I was talking about. Oh, the person who is saying the thing about supervision is what makes the therapist good. And I just wrote a comment about how what I just said, that like
Yeah.
I think education's important. I think supervision's important, but the most important thing I think is the level of insight that you have. and
Within yourself.
within yourself. And that because no amount of good supervision or education is going to make up for a lack of insight or a lack of awareness. You're just not even going to know what to look for. You're not going to be able to spot the patterns in somebody else that you haven't spotted in yourself, kind of.
Generally speaking, you're right.
Yeah, generally. Yeah, and that's where the nuance comes in. And I said this also in the comment that, it's like, well, I believe that I can be a much better guide to people when it comes to experiences that I've had, things that I've walked through myself, then I can be a much better guide to them there. Um, but I'm limited in that way. I can't have every experience. And so that's where good supervision comes in education, because I haven't had certain types of experience. And so I might not know certain nuances to how to approach a particular situation. And I just couldn't,
Right.
like for example, like I've never dealt with OCD in
Oh,
my
okay.
in myself. Um,
Right.
so it's a bit foreign. Where it's not foreign is that to me, I believe all of these presentations of different symptoms, that it's all on a spectrum, and that it's all very much kind of the same stuff, but just different degrees. And so, OCD, to me, that's just on the extreme end of the anxiety spectrum. And I know what anxiety is like, and I've attended to that in myself. And so I can relate to a lot of it, but there's like a certain level of intensity or severity that it's just not a part of my experience. So I
Sure.
don't have a good context for it.
Right. Right. This kind of we might disagree on this, because I know in the last podcast conversation you talked about you can only take people as far as you've taken yourself, or something to that effect, if you want to
Mhm.
reword that. And I I do believe there's a seed of truth there, but I also, and maybe we're agreeing now that I'm thinking about what you just said. um, there's a seed of truth there, but I also think uh, good supervision, proper supervision, education, training, and experience actually makes up for that, or even more than makes up for that. So even if I have never, like, I've never dealt with smoking, I can still use my skills to help someone quit smoking, even though I don't know what that's like. I do know
Mhm.
what certain addictive tendencies are like, for sure. Um, and the way that I kind of analogize, what's the word?
Is that a word? I don't know.
Maybe
Maybe.
metaphorize. The way that I explain this is, who is better at basketball? Is it Michael Jordan, or is it his coach? Well, obviously, it's Michael Jordan.
Mhm.
He's the GOAT, right? Or Kobe Bryant, or whoever. But like, well, why does Michael Jordan get coached by somebody who's inferior? Because the coach has a skill set that can help Michael Jordan get to the next level, even though he's inferior at basketball. He has a certain
Mhm.
skill set. So it doesn't even matter if he's inferior, right?
Mhm. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's hard
But
to
it,
argue against.
obviously, that's not always the case. It's like, I feel like there's like a baseline. If it's like you're always getting triggered in session, or you're just total in denial, then yeah, it's like, okay, you got to address that. Um, I think getting to a baseline and having that self awareness and that level of, yeah,
I think maybe it also depends on what outcome you're trying to get. And we're just like in an episode now. This is happening.
Oh, I thought, yeah, I mean, I thought we were recording. Yeah, I thought we were
Oh,
just,
okay.
oh
Well,
no.
we didn't do
Uh,
the intro.
Oh, my bad, dude. I thought because we were just talking and I was like, okay, so totally even. Okay, that's fine.
We'll do the intro at the end
That's fine.
and cut it in. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Okay.
Um, yeah, maybe it depends what the outcome is because in your basketball analogy, it's about skills, right? Like basketball is a set of skills. Don't bite me. And so um so yeah, so then you can have a coach. Hold on. I just thought of something.
Mm.
Get out of my way. I don't know if you were hearing that, but I have this it's like a structured water thing. Do you know what structured water is?
I think like you pour it into this thing that purifies it and makes it pure.
Fancy.
I don't know.
It has
Yeah.
like a thing in it, like it creates a vortex and it's supposed to mimic water in nature because like if we drink water from a natural source it's going to be like moving and when water moves the molecules are structured because they're I don't know because they're bouncing off shit or whatever
Okay.
um and most tap water it's like sitting there and when it sits there long enough the molecules get unstructured and so then it's like harder for our bodies to absorb it or something so this just creates a little vortex and then it structures the molecules.
Well, what about just like, you know, pure regular purified water?
Well, it's just different because it could be purified but still unstructured. So I have a filter and then I pour the filtered
And then
water into the structurey thing.
okay.
But anyway, it makes this noise and I wasn't sure if my mic was picking
No,
it up or not.
no, I didn't hear it.
Okay.
Zoom has a great way of filtering. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, if so when it comes to basketball, if that's skills and then the coach has a particular skill set of teaching these skills. He doesn't have to be better than Michael Jordan at the skills, but he's got a skill set in order to help Michael Jordan improve his skills.
Yes.
And I think that this gets into our conversation about what is therapy.
I would
And
love, yeah. Yeah.
and this is a particular um, one particular definition of therapy is that it's about skill building. It's about building particular skills, could be emotional skills, emotional regulation skills, communication skills. Um, I mean, kind of depends how you define this, but it could also get into like awareness, self-awareness could be a skill.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that kind of ruins my future argument, but but whatever. Um, so anyway, so a lot of people think of therapy as it's like, okay, well, my mind just went in 100 different directions. Okay, I'll take it slow. So a lot of people think of therapy like I don't have this skill and actually, I think this is more on the therapist end. The therapist is thinking this client is coming to me, they're lacking a particular skill, and I'm going to help them develop this skill. That's like one view of what therapy can be.
Right.
And so then it's like you get into all these different skill building modalities. I think CBT is probably falls under that category. Do you think so?
Um, yeah, I guess so.
It's like a skill it's a skill to be
Yeah.
able to identify core beliefs and the associated thoughts and feelings
Okay. Yeah.
and then to reframe it and all that stuff.
Yeah. And like the
Re, re,
DBT and all these other
yeah.
things, all the
Yeah,
T's.
DBT is like I mean, they call it the DBT skills
Right.
manual or worksheet handouts.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's just tons and tons of skills. And and again, it's like, well, you could get into like parts work, like IFS type stuff, and internal family systems, and that's a different type of skill. So this is where I'm getting a little annoyed because I can say that anything's a skill, but like, why am I annoyed? It's because here's the thing. It's like when I think about AI, this sounds like a tangent, but it applies. When I think about AI and what's going to happen to the field, the therapies that are formulaic, it's a formula for delivering a particular skill set or information. Anything that's based on information and formulaic skill building, easily taken over by robots and AI.
Right.
So that's why to me, therapy is, I mean, I could call it, I could still say that these things are particular types of skills, but it's not a skill, it's not a skill that it's not so easily taught. It's not like basketball, like I can just, I can show you something. I can show you how to shoot from a particular angle or something. I don't know basketball. uh, and then you just repeat it, and then great. Now you have the skill. It's to me, it's like it's so much more dynamic at a certain level. I see it as like there's this foundation of skills that absolutely needs to be taught. And that's why I do like CBT and DBT and these types of things. I think there's a lot of value in them, but I think that they're inherently limited because if you're getting to the real heart of what is therapy supposed to be, well, I think it can be many different things, but what it can be, the potential of it at the highest level that we know of, at least right now, is it's about transforming your relationship with yourself and your own experience. Is that a skill?
Yeah,
I
I think
guess.
so.
I guess so, but it's not like a straightforward skill where I can just say, here's how you do it. Because well, I can say that, but it
Yeah,
doesn't it
that's
doesn't
why.
matter.
Well, that's why you go to therapy.
Right.
It's for that. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think we're actually vibing a lot. Sorry, were you? I didn't know if you were finished or not.
I could just keep going forever, so you go.
No, I actually we're actually in a lot of agreement. People have different definitions of therapy, and I agree. It's like what I see is like these skills and these worksheets and all these things. They're almost like training wheels, right? Like if you've never gone to therapy ever, never just picked up any personal development book in your life, I'm making this seem really terrible. But if it's just like, yeah, you just like this is like you're just brand new to this thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you need like training wheels. Like you don't just get on the bike because you're gonna fall down and scrape your knee. So you get the training wheels so you can get a feel for it. Then finally you can take off the training wheels. And then it's scary. It's like, oh, but now you can start to improvise. And now you have more awareness and it's more dynamic. It's more psychodynamic. Oh my God. Um yeah. So I actually quite agree. To me, therapy is changing your relation to yourself. I'd agree. It is changing your relationship to a thing, to any given thing, ultimately, because you can't change anything from the outside. Um, or you can't control it. I'm sure you can do things to probabilistically influence your environment or people, but you can't guarantee an outcome. Um, yeah, it is changing your relationship to a thing. And part of that is the skills, which is kind of necessary, the training wheels. But to me, um, unless you're resolving certain issues at a root cause, all I mean by root cause is it's something underlying, right? It's something within your subconscious. then it's going to be very difficult to really change your relationship to a thing.
Mm. Wait, say that again.
Unless you are resolving. See, to me, therapy is about resolving an issue.
Mhm.
And the issue isn't within the unconscious. So unless we're actually resolving a certain issue unconsciously, or sorry, at an unconscious level, it's going to be very difficult to change your relationship to a given thing.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
See, yeah. Okay. So I almost wanted, at first, I almost wanted to say the exact opposite. That
Oh,
unless you change your relationship to, I would say either to yourself or to an object of experience, to your experience, that the issue can't be resolved.
right.
But I think it's both. I think there's a little bit of both in there. It just kind of depends.
And I think maybe our disagreements, and I thought about this, I thought about like, why do we disagree? And I think the bulk of our disagreements might come from how we are defining certain things, but also just uh I think we have similar personalities, but not quite. And so we have slightly different temperaments and personalities and ways of thinking. And so we're just explaining things from a slightly different vantage point and from your, obviously, from your influences, much more influenced by Buddhism than I am.
Mhm.
You know, with my Christian background, I don't even know how to even articulate all the influences there. Um, I was going somewhere with that. Changing your relationship to a thing.
Mhm.
So you're saying, in order to resolve a thing, you must change your relationship to that first. So like that comes uh logically prior.
I don't know if I actually want to say that. I mean, I'd say I lean towards saying yes, that, but I feel like there's a non-dual thing here. So it's like it's both.
Right.
Because sometimes what you said resonated with me. It's like sometimes something has to shift in my unconscious in order for me to change my relationship to something or to myself.
Generally. Yeah.
Yeah. But other times the thing won't shift until I change my relationship. Often it's like it won't shift until I change my relationship to my efforting, to my trying to shift it. Okay. So yeah, so I was saying that often, and this seems to be a lot of what I work with people on, is it's like this meta level of how you're relating to the thing that you're calling a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're calling something a problem, and then you're exerting effort to try to change this thing that you don't like, that you think is a problem. You feel bad about it usually. And and from my point of view, it's the relationship to it. It's even the decision that it's a problem and the associated judgment, shame, and pressure that usually comes along with that. It keeps it locked in place. And so there's like this fundamental shift that can happen in how you're relating to a thing. It's like letting go of trying to change it so that you can have an experience of surrender, and then it changes your relationship to the thing. You can then approach it from a more loving, compassionate place, and then it can actually change.
I do agree with most of it.
Me too.
So yeah. Uh
Most of it. Like, I don't think that's like 100% right all the time, but it does seem to be true most of the time.
yeah.
Where it's not right all the time is And this is, I think, maybe where you have skills that I don't have, coming from like hypnotherapy background and just some of the tools that you have working with the unconscious and stuff, that I think sometimes you can just address something head on, like it's a problem, identifying a problem and then just doing a thing, and then it creates some kind of change. It can happen. I don't have a lot of luck with that in my own life, but but I believe that it's possible.
Interesting.
Like I'm trying to think of one example in my life where I did that and it actually worked. And I don't know. There's got to be something, but I can't think of one.
Well, it from what I've seen, it you do some kind of processes like inner child and I don't know what you call it, uh time
Time traveling.
time travel.
No,
Um
I don't usually call it that. I just, yeah, inner child work.
yeah. So I do think those processes, in my opinion, are hypnotic processes, and depending on the person, the problem, and timing, they generally can work. Um, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
So yeah, so this is maybe where it gets a little tricky, is that I think on the surface it sounds, and I think we've had this conversation, but on the surface it sounds the same, because it's like, let's get a little more specific. I said that and then my mind went blank. Well, okay, maybe I'll get specific in a minute, but what I was saying is that it sounds the same because it's like still you're approaching yourself, and I would say you're attending to a wound that's there. And so what's the difference between saying attending to a wound versus fixing a problem?
Well, one sounds a little bit more warm and fuzzy. The other one kind of sounds more mechanical.
Yeah, and maybe the analogy of wounds breaks down, because a wound is a problem.
Yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, it's like yeah, a wound is a problem. It needs to be attended to so that it can heal, so that it can be fixed. Um, but I guess what I'm getting at is that the process of healing, to a large degree, I think it's something that we can participate in, but not have control over. And I think, I don't know if I'd said this last time, but I think I said it to you previously, that I view the mind, the psyche, like the body. Like it's actually a self-healing uh, organism, or a self-healing thing. And all it needs is the right environment, or the right like, you have to remove, I think the analogy I used before is, you might have to remove some kind of infection from a wound, and you have to do something in order to remove the infection, but then the body will heal it, will heal the wound on its own after that. and
Right.
i and I think the psyche is very much like that. It's like, often something just needs to be removed, and then it'll heal itself.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in that analogy, all the tools that we're using as a practitioner, healer, therapist, is the process of removing whatever's in the way of healing.
Yeah. I kind of lost track of what the original point was here, but
Me too.
oh, because we were thinking, yeah, I was talking about like if something's a problem. And so I think that the issue with viewing things as a problem is that it often moves into the territory of a mathematical equation. Problem, solution. And then you just think usually what humans do is they attach a value judgment to it. If there's a problem, there's something wrong with me. And the tricky thing is that if you have a wound and a wound is a problem, then we could say that having a wound means there's something wrong with you.
Right.
We could say that, but if you say that, it's going to fuck you up.
Right. That's the paradox.
It's going to make it harder to heal, probably. If you are judging yourself as broken because you have a wound. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. I'm looking at it as you still got to heal the wound.
Who?
I feel like this is like a trick question coming. Uh, uh, whoever. So look, it's and maybe I'm
Whoever.
whoever. I mean, if you have a wound, and you go to someone for help, it's a collaborative process, right? It's not exactly like you go to the doctor, they give you a band-aid or whatever, lollipop, here you go. Um, but this is maybe where I disagree, right? I don't think it's necessary to surrender to some higher power. If that helps you, that's amazing. I think that's a great resource. I think that's a powerful frame to come from. Um, I do think there are certain processes, if done relationally, right, collaboratively, and not mechanically, that can heal the wound. And so, who is doing the healing? I guess it's both and it's both the person who has the wound and the person that they're seeking help from or paying them or whoever, right? And yeah, yeah,
So just like 1,000 thoughts trying to come out at once. Okay, so if the fundamental purpose of psychotherapy is to, well, what would you say it is?
yeah. And I think this is where we might possibly disagree, right? So the fundamental, the goal of psychotherapy, I think for most people, is restructuring their personality. But if we don't want to get that heavy or that deep, if it's just like, hey, I have this phobia and I no longer want to have this phobia. Well, and the goal of therapy is okay. Let's get to that point. Like, let's remove that. If we have removed it and you no longer have that phobia or whatever it is, perfect. We have done. We're successful. We've done our job. And generally speaking, we have to get to the unconscious cause. If we resolve it there, if we successfully present a prediction error or a disconfirmation to the subconscious and it accepts it, it will collapse that original learning or understanding that's been causing whatever problem that you have. Now, some people are more complex and that needs to be done multiple times on different, right, like related things, right? So generally like people with a complex trauma, it's going to be more complex versus just you know, maybe a phobia. It depends. But yeah, so the goal of therapy is to resolve things. And resolving things is changing your relationship to that thing.
And why do we want to resolve things?
Because we're suffering.
Yeah. So it's to decrease suffering.
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, it is to decrease suffering and to promote becoming whole and human flourishing.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so I see the more non-dual philosophy and you know, acceptance and um, you know, you're changing your relationship to a thing. You're not putting judgments on that. You're not, you know, so on and so forth, and you're not labeling it as a problem. I actually do see that as a skill set, and I don't see that as the root cause.
Mhm. So the root cause is um how I don't know how you would say it, but like patterns that get it's adaptations in the unconscious. It's like things that our unconscious does because of trauma or
Yeah,
dysfunction, whatever,
yeah,
to protect us. It forms particular structures, and then those structures enact certain patterns of thinking, feeling, behavior.
yeah, yeah.
And so addressing that it gets rid of those patterns,
Yes, yeah,
which then decreases suffering.
yeah, yeah. And now building that skill set of radical acceptance and non-judgment and not labeling things as a problem, right? It will help you tremendously in resolving the root issue. And I actually think the reverse is also true. Like I think it's bi-directional. Like by resolving some of the traumas, you'll actually have an easier time accepting things.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but um, I don't see that. I see that more as a skill set rather than the root issue.
Mm.
Is that true? Yeah. I
Yes.
just had to double check.
Okay. So yeah, so where I disagree is that hmm, it's how I, and this goes back to your earlier point of maybe we're just defining things differently, but it's like the the adaptations that happen, um, I like to call them traumatic adaptations, but just what our system does to protect us through our childhoods, to get us through dysfunctional environments and trauma. What it does is, on a fundamental level, it creates more and more experience of separation, of being a separate self. And so these things, these structures in the unconscious, not only are they serving to protect us in a particular way, but now usually later on in life creating issues for us, creating suffering, but the the effect of that is also like creating more of an experience of a false self, of an identity that isn't actually you. And So to me, the foundational thing is identity. It's that we identify with these structures unconsciously. The identification happens unconsciously, but we're identifying with these structures of conditioning as me. This is me. You know, if I'm an anxious person, people say that all the time. I'm an anxious
Mhm.
person. It's like, well, I don't believe that. You might appear to be an anxious person for sure. You experience yourself as an anxious person, but that's that's the system that was created to protect you. There's like a purpose behind it. That's like the crazy intelligence of our psyche, that it just creates this whole personality structure to get us through shit. Um, and but yeah, but then we just judge it as a problem. People feel like that. I think a lot of times people don't understand how crazy intelligent your system has to be in order to construct these things, and like how tricky the construction is too. It's wild. It's like it's crazy. Um, so it's a brilliant thing. It's not you're so fucked up that's why you're like this. It's like actually your system was so good at adapting to an inhospitable environment that now this is what's happening.
Right. Right.
Anyway, a little bit on a tangent, but if I could simplify everything, to me, the primary goal of psychotherapy is to eliminate inner conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, the primary inner conflict is believing that you are a separate self
Uh, from from other people.
from from anything from so hmm, language is failing me. So okay, so this is going to be kind of a long rant, but I got to do it. So just thinking of things from a developmental psychology perspective, it's like I don't I'm going to get the timelines wrong, whatever, it'll be close enough. But before 18 months, probably much younger actually, we'll just say in the first 6 months, we're just fused. That's what I've read.
Right.
That we are just we don't have a separate self formed, we are fused. And we're in a state of fusion, and so we're like, it's like we cry, but not it's not even that, it's not we cry, it's crying. Like the experience, if you can imagine being an infant, you don't have a separate sense of self, so it's not like I'm crying right now, it's just crying's happening, just you just are that, and that's the experience, theoretically.
Right.
I've experienced that on psychedelics, but we could have a whole conversation
Crying.
about that. Being one with the emotional expression, or the need. It's like just need, emotional expression and need. That's all an infant is. Is that right? I don't know. We'll stick with that. And then you start to develop a sense of self around whatever the timeline is, a year, more so 18 months, definitely 2 years. You go into the me mind phase. So it's like very much, the world is mine. That's like the terrible twos. It's like the world, everything is mine. And so it's like narcissism, basically. It's like this narcissistic stage that needs to happen because it's the solidification of a separate egoic self sense, which we need in order to operate in the world. But even though we develop that at such a young age, then we continue on, and in early childhood, you can see it in kids. There's so much more, there's so much less self-consciousness typically in a child, in a small child. They just do shit. They just run around and go crazy and have fun and explore, and they don't have these complex filters for, it's like social rules and norms and all that stuff.
Right.
And again, we need some of those. So it's not like those are a bad thing. And I'm not saying we should all return to being five, but what I am saying is that there's an aspect of being, it's forgetting yourself. It's the complete forgetting of yourself, where you are lost in the flow of your own present moment experience with no self-consciousness, no inner conflict. Those kids, they don't run into inner conflict until a parent says, stop doing that shit. and then it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. What's going on here? And then, over time, we internalize those rules, and now we can inner conflict ourselves.
Yeah.
We can limit ourselves,
Right. Right.
which again is necessary. It's a necessary stage of development. However, I do think most of the time parents go overboard with this, in that, unintentionally, of course, but it's like the limitations get too rigid, and the censoring. It's like we train these children to self-censor way more than they need to, maybe. Or maybe we do need to do that, and then it's like we actually need to go that rigid, and then later on in life we can undo it. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's just a necessary stage. Everyone seems to go through it, but I think everyone also grows up in dysfunctional environments. So I don't know.
Yeah.
um, so so the adaptations, it creates a separation where you can have a self that is watching yourself, but it's not like witnessing awareness. It's a judgmental self. I'm talking about
Ah.
a critical self that can watch everything you're doing and let you know if it's right or wrong. So that's like the formation of a rigid dualistic self that's based on criticism and right and wrong.
Okay. I think I'm understanding. So when you're saying uh having no self or not being self-conscious, it's like this like this flow state, this being state, kind of like childhood before you put had all these rules put on you. And then as soon as that happens, then there's that the critical part,
Mhm.
a judgment part.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when I say that the foundational issue is separation, or believing that you're a separate self, what I mean is, Hmm. I don't want to get overly I don't want to get hypercognitive about this. So what I mean is that there's a it's a different type of lived experience. I would frame it as that there's this flow of experience that, like, non-duality, it contains duality. It's both. If it's non-dual, then it's both non-dual and dual, because it can't just be non-dual or else it's dual. Did that make sense?
Yeah, but I think, yeah, language. Yeah.
So, when I'm talking about non-duality or oneness, I also just use the word God or divinity. It's all the same to me.
Hmm.
Um, I guess consciousness, people use that. To me, it is consciousness, but it might be like more than that. But whatever. But the point is that it is our fundamental nature, and that I think when we can have an experience of it, which it's the foundation of experience, so it's a little bit, the words get all fucked up, but when we have access to this, it's inherently healing. It's inherently transformative. It eliminates inner conflict, because if you know that you are this thing, this oneness thing, if you know you have the experience of it, then there's nothing to fight with, because it's all that. There's nothing to eliminate, because it's all that. There's no problem to fix. That's the initial step. Then you see, well, in the world of non-duality, the dual is still there, so there's still stuff to address.
Right. Right.
But it would then be coming at it from a very different angle, because it's not some solid self that you're, often what I see in people that I work with is they've got the solid sense of self that's fighting against what appears to be a solid sense of self. So if we could just remove those things, just remove the solid sense of self, then there's no fighting. Great. Now there's no obstacle to healing. What are you thinking?
I'm just I'm okay, so when you say solid sense of self, you're talking about the false persona that you're attaching to? Is that
This is, I might just say this 1,000 times throughout all of our conversations, but, and it's so, I feel a little frustrated saying it, because it's so it's like standard non-dual bullshit of like, language fails, language can't possibly capture it.
right?
But it's true. Language is inherently dualistic, so it can't. But um, but we can still talk. So sorry, what did you say?
So I was trying to understand the solid self
Oh,
versus the solid self, right? It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so okay. So I appear to be Kevin. I like to say it like that, because it is how I appear to be. I can touch my body. It appears to be separate. I can touch all of these things. They all appear to be separate. If they didn't, I would be in a state of psychosis.
Yeah.
And totally non-functional.
Right.
And if you've experienced psychosis, if you've experienced high dose psychedelics, it mimics that experience. So it is oneness, no boundaries, and everything gets very overwhelming and confusing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to lose the appearance of a separate self because I don't want to be psychotic. I don't want to, that's a scary experience. And I want to be able to navigate my life. But what happens, and in these conversations, I don't know if this is clear to the viewer slash listener, but I'll make it clear right now that this is all, to me, I'm workshopping all of this. This isn't straightforward stuff that I feel like, I don't know, like 100% confident in, or like this is, I'm just right about this, and you're wrong, and everyone else is wrong, and I'm the authority here, whatever. I don't actually believe that. I do have really strong beliefs, I guess, or really strong senses of things, and so there's that. But I'm trying to make sense of something that I don't think I don't think I don't even know if we can make sense of it. But I'm trying. I think we can get closer and closer over time. I think we have gotten closer and closer over time. And that's my mission here. That's like my purpose. And so anyway, so as I'm developing, I start to I that separation happens, that initial separation where I'm internalizing my parents, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm internalizing my parents, and now I've got my internal parents watching me live my life. And I can start to censor myself in the classroom. I'm in elementary school or whatever. I can start to feel my own shame and embarrassment, which will curtail certain behaviors and keep me from doing certain things. But that experience already there, it's like now I've got this solid sense of self where I identify with the rules that I was given by my parents.
Okay.
And this is, as a kid, even as adults, most people don't know, they can't they can't actually separate themselves in a different kind of way. They can't separate themselves from the internalized parent to see this is my internalized parent. They just feel like that's me. These are my values. That's what I believe, whatever. You're with me?
Yeah.
And and so I've got this solid sense of self that is my internalized parents, but then I also have the solid sense of self, which is the me that is living my life. But both of
Yeah.
those,
Huh.
and the relationship between those two, is they reinforce each other. They reify each other. They make each other feel more real because I do things and I experience shame and guilt or whatever, blame maybe. Um, and so it's all kind of fused together. It's so interesting because it's like there's this separation, but also a fusion at the exact same time. Because in those, until we deal with it, we are fused with those unconscious structures.
Right.
It is me. I mean, that's the experience that it
Mm-hmm.
is me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so yeah, so when I'm talking about solid sense of self fighting against a solid sense of self, it's like these two incorrect perceptions about myself, about who I am, who and what I am. One says, I don't know, they could say different things, I guess. Internalized parents, for me, my internalized parents would say stuff about how I'm fundamentally wrong to the core. Wait, is that my internalized parent? um, hmm. But this is where they're fused because the inner child, my inner child feels like there's something fundamentally wrong with me. That's been my thing, and I think that that's basically the same story for everybody.
Yeah, that's been my thing as well.
It might have a little different flavors, but it's basically the same. So my inner child feels that way, and the messaging from my internalized parents reinforces that feeling. Because usually my internalized parents, it's all shoulds. It's like I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. And then that is basically just saying you're wrong for doing this, you're wrong for doing that. And you would be right if you did it like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, very right, wrong focused, but it's like morally right, morally wrong.
Okay.
There's like a moral judgment there.
Hmm.
Um, so where am I going here? So they are constantly fighting against each other. And I like to throw in the inner teenager into the mix too. I've got my inner child, internalized parents, inner teenager. I think in IFS they've got all these different parts. I'm not familiar with all of it. And I think it can be helpful, but it gets too complicated for me. It's like I just want to simplify it because to me, most of those can be contained in my inner child. Like that's all inner child stuff. Even my internalized parents, I say, are a part of my inner child
Interesting. Okay.
because, well, because that's when it formed when I was a kid. So it was, yeah, it's just part of that experience. The whole experience of the inner child is feeling wrong for something and then having some idea of what would make it right, how I should be. And then I just like to throw in the inner teenager because it's this rebellious energy that comes in against the internalized parent. So the
Right.
internalized parent says, you should do this. The teenager comes in and says, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
Right.
But then the inner child feels bad for doing whatever he wants to do, and the cycle continues.
Right. Right.
Did I answer your question? I don't know.
I don't remember. Well, yes, yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah, and now
The
I'm
two,
thinking like it's very. I guess IFS would have very different language for all of that, right? Yeah, but it does seem very congruent with an IFS model.
yeah, I'm actually
Yeah.
going to do a training next weekend with Locke Kelly, who he's like a meditation teacher who I think he's like technically lineage holder for Adyashanti, um, but he's a LCSW, and the training is about IFS and what he calls effortless mindfulness
Hmm.
and combining those two. So that'll be interesting. But I think it'll be somewhat in the realm of what I like to do. But if I could simplify everything, because it's like I actually like to get into the weeds with all of it, but then at some point I feel like it's just a bunch of nonsense. And it's like, how do I make it tangible and like a practical?
Yeah.
What's the practical reason for any of this?
Yeah.
Because it sounds far-fetched to some people. It sounds just fucking out there. And what does that even mean? What does it even mean to not be to either be a separate self or not be a separate self? It's like I'm here. I'm a human. So who cares? um, which is kind of what happens in Zen or in these spiritual awakening traditions. I'm reading one of my favorite books is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind
Hmm.
by Shunryu Suzuki. And I'm rereading it right now. And he just said, he says it like this, and I've heard this so many times in different ways, but it's like before enlightenment or spiritual awakening, it seems like a really special thing. And it is. But then when you experience it, it's no big deal. It's nothing at all.
Hmm.
And that's the um I kind of forgot how I started on this track, but that's like the spirit of the non-dual wisdom, and why it is practically applicable, but it doesn't seem like it at first, because it's like, yeah, well, that's why I said it is like, because after you have an experience of it, then you're like, well, now I'm just a human.
Mm-hmm.
So who cares? And that's what I was saying in the last episode. It's like, I don't actually care about enlightenment anymore or spiritual awakening. There's a part of me that thinks that I should, like I should, I don't know, there's practices I should engage in and have more of a whatever kundalini awakening, or something more special, do something more special than this. But mostly I don't care anymore.
You think that's that would be like the pinnacle? Like that's enlightenment. It's like, fuck it. Who cares?
Well, I don't know. I think the interesting thing, and maybe I heard Adyashanti say this before, or other people, but is that um well, I used to be involved in this school, this practice school, whatever, called Waking Down in Mutuality.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, so waking down, it was like about bringing the awakening into the body,
Okay.
embodying it. And then in mutuality, it was about the importance of doing it with others, of being in a community where you could share the experiences, you could talk about it, you could practice together, and that's like a really important aspect of it. And it was great. Um, and they called it the second birth, which is very much like, I think, like Christianity.
You're very perceptive. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
You
the
must be
re
born again
hmm
in order to enter the kingdom of God.
yeah. So what was I saying?
Second birth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's this thing that we call spiritual awakening, enlightenment, realization of your non-dual nature, whatever, that it is like that. I like calling it a second birth, because it's like, now I'm a baby. Now I feel more like a toddler. But it's not like, oh, this is the pinnacle. It's like, this is the beginning.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's why I believe that this is like fundamentally, I mean, it's life-changingly important, that if we can actually include this in the healing and psychotherapy process for people who want it. Not everybody wants whatever this is.
Right. And that's what maybe part of my pushback is that not everyone's going to be on board with this type of philosophy and thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And then ultimately it's like, this is, I'm driving myself crazy. I don't know if I'm driving you crazy, but but like I drive myself crazy with the language around all this too, because it's so, like, I understand it doesn't make sense. And in in this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he does, I mean, he does such a beautiful job of presenting it because it's all poetry. It's like non-dual language. It's saying like, this is true. And then in the next sentence, he's like, yeah, but that's not true. And then in the next sentence, he's like, I know I'm not making any sense. But when you experience it, then you know what I'm talking about. And that's the truth. And that's the
Fair
truth.
enough. Fair
So,
enough.
but also, who fucking cares? Because then you could just say any kind of nonsense and just say, well, if you experience it, then this nonsense would make sense to you.
Right.
And so whatever. But so I honor where everyone's at. I don't think this is going to be attractive to probably a lot of people, maybe most people. But here's the thing. A fundamental part of psychotherapy to me is, again, if it's about eliminating inner conflict, then to me it's about examining and getting curious about your self-perception.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you take that to the end of the line, then you start to ask questions about, well, what am I? What is consciousness? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? Am I my emotions? Am I my sensations? And then if you engage in meditative practice, the common experience is no, you're not those things. You can observe those things, and anything you can observe, you are not, because you're the observer. So what's the observer? I don't I don't know. I can't see it. So I appear to be a human being. I appear to be my body. I appear to be at least in my body. I appear to have thoughts. I appear to have emotions. Have them. There's an I that has them. There's like that indicates I have some kind of ownership over it, or it's like it's mine,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the experience that I have when I'm really paying attention is there are thoughts, there are emotions, there is body. But who is the I that has it? It's just some idea of Kevin.
Do you find that some people, especially those with trauma, may incorrectly latch onto this type of idea and can perhaps dissociate or um, essentially, spiritually bypass a lot of things, and then uh, perhaps that's there's like no boundaries, and so they get this wrong idea. It's like, oh, boundaries don't matter, right?
Can you define for the listener what spiritual bypassing is?
Sure, sure. That's good. Yeah. By spiritually bypassing, I mean you are in denial of any kind of wounds, and you start to uh, use any type of philosophy. So in this case, it would be non-dual philosophy. Use that as a escape mechanism from the things that you're, really avoiding, right? The things that you're not willing to take a look at within yourself. And so part of spiritual bypassing is also like not feeling your feelings, right? That would be the most common way to kind of phrase it.
Yeah. Or like, well, I experience anxiety or fear, but then I can just say, well, it appears to be fear, but it's not real. It's all an illusion.
Yeah.
So let me not feel that.
Right.
Or let me not experience my discomfort associated with having that experience.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I think I did that probably for 14 years.
Oh man. Holy crap.
I mean, to one degree or another.
What do you think got you to stop?
You like to ask the good questions. Um, what got me to stop? People call it the dark night of the soul. I don't really like that term. I don't know why. It just maybe I'm just annoyed at spiritual people for overusing it. But I hit rock bottom. I had the experience of, for the first time in my life, I think, of becoming aware of the extent to which I was trying to prop myself up with an identity or with a particular self-image, and that I really bought into it. And I was desperately clinging onto it and trying to sell it to others, really trying to sell it to myself, to do exactly what you were saying, to not feel something, to not feel the reality of what it's like to be me. And life, in the way that I think it beautifully and uh, intelligently does, is it destroyed everything that, um, well, destroyed everything that was important to me, that I was attached to, and that somehow that just led to the complete collapse of that whole thing, of the identity, and then of anything that was trying to prop me up. It was the ultimate humbling. Just brought me to my knees, and it was like, oh, after all these years of doing healing work and engaging in spiritual practice and all the spiritual awakening experiences and all the energetic shit, that I'm still a fucking mess. I'm still a scared little boy and terrified of not being good enough and what that might mean. Having people that I love abandon me because I'm not good enough. And that makes me the same as everybody else. So then, yeah, then I just got miserable enough that there was no avoiding it.
Mm.
There
Mm.
was no avoiding it.
Mm.
And maybe I didn't want to anymore. I don't know. I think I was so distraught
Yeah.
by losing my relationship, losing my business, losing my health,
Mm.
losing my status, move and having to move back in with my parents, just all of it, that I was just so distraught that I couldn't bypass it. But also there was something in me that I think, because of all the work that I had done, there was something in me that was like this is happening because it's supposed to. Like, I need this to happen. There's an inherent wisdom in this experience that is going to take me somewhere. And I knew that even when I was just desperately not wanting to feel all that.
Mm.
And now I'm, 2 years out from that moment. and still kind of picking up the pieces in a way,
Hmm.
but um, there's nothing in me that wants to bypass anything. Well, that's probably not true. But that's it too. That's it too, you know? It's like the consciousness, the awareness of that,
Hmm.
that that maybe I'll always have a part of me that will try to be sneaky and hide shit.
Right. I
Probably.
mean, we all do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do it. I have a hard question.
Oh God.
But if, even in your personal experience, for 14 years, even by embracing non-dual principles, and there was all that spiritual bypassing for that time, wouldn't that make embracing non-dual principles inherently dangerous or risky?
Hmm. I don't know. Is it more dangerous or risky than not? Because the default is the opposite. It's embracing the appearance of separation as if it is the ultimate reality. So you got to do one. Is it which one's better? I don't know. I would say, well, your question, to answer your question, yes. I think it's risky. Just like I think taking psychedelics is risky. I don't think it's something people should take lightly. That can totally change everything. So, you know, if are you ready for that? It's a complete, flipping life upside down potentially. And so I think any kind of thing like that is going to be inherently risky, because it just, it's a complete reorientation, and in that process there could be lots of sticking points. So I guess, what I thought you were going to ask, which is similar, is would I have been better off not getting into non-duality until now? Like maybe if I had waited until now.
Oh man, that's such a better question. Damn. Okay, I wish I had thought of that. Please continue.
Well, you almost did it.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I have to say, like, unequivocally, no. That's my impression, that I would not be better off. But I don't exactly know if that's because of non-duality in and of itself, or if it's because me going in that direction branched off into a lot of other things, a lot of other people coming into my life, really important people, a lot of other practices and healing modalities and ways of thinking about things. So it branched off in some really interesting ways that, had I not had that, maybe I just would have been stuck with like regular old cognitive therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it gets a little murky,
Yeah.
but I'd say seeking, in the spiritual world, in the spiritual awakening world, this idea of seeking is seeking to understand your true nature, seeking to experience it, really, I think ultimately it's seeking a stabilized spiritual awakening, consistent. People have lots of experiences of spiritual awakening, but then they
Yeah.
want to stabilize it.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
often the language that's used.
Okay, that's an interesting word. Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is maybe my contention with the pursuit of enlightenment and these different experiences. Like I love those. I've had a lot of spiritual experiences, even in Christianity. Um, and and then after that, I took psychedelics multiple times, and those were amazing experiences. Hard experiences, difficult, but still very enlightening. But I always came away a little bit disappointed because I could never. It was like, that's cool. I had all this insight, but what actually fundamentally changed about me in my life? Not a whole lot, if anything. So I felt disappointed, and I do think, yeah, like you're getting to a very needed question. It's like, how do you like truly integrate it in a way that it's consistent and actually produces lasting changes? I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Okay, well, the last thing you said was something about how what I was talking about brings up the question of
Oh yeah,
how to stabilize awakening.
yeah,
Um, a part of me feels completely unqualified to talk about that.
fair
Uh,
enough.
and maybe that's because I know that in different traditions, there are specific practices meant to stabilize it. And a lot of people take what to me seems like a pretty formulaic approach to that whole thing. And that hasn't been my path. So, um, and do I experience a sort of stabilized awakening or do I not? Maybe some people would say, well, you would know it if it was stable. And maybe that's true, in which case, then it's not stable. um, but it's certainly here most of the time. And I know that it's actually here all the time. I just forget about it.
The perennial problem.
I get wrapped up in myself.
Yeah.
So maybe that's also why I go pretty heavy on the importance of it, because I still to this day experience the difference in the quality of my life, the quality of a moment when I'm lost in identification with myself as compared to not. But from a truly non-dual perspective, being lost in identification with yourself doesn't matter. Like that doesn't
Right.
need to never happen. And you could actually simultaneously be lost in experience of identification with yourself and connected to the deeper reality,
Hmm.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess see that. Um, it's like that's just part of the human experience, and so not accepting that would be dual, right? Or it would be, I would use the word resistance, but you have to accept the resistance as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you don't
Well,
have to, but
one of the things I love about Adyashanti is that he, I think, has been really consistent over the years of referring to awakening as that which never changes. I mean, he doesn't use that language, but based more or less. it's the thing that's always here. If it's something that can come and go, it isn't the foundation of you. It's not consciousness. It's not spirit, because spirit doesn't come and go. It's always the same. It's the foundation upon which states arise. So you can have a state experience of spiritual awakening, but then it goes away. But that's not the foundation. That's not the ground of being.
Hmm. And by spiritual awakening, and I might have asked this last time, so forgive me. Do you mean simply becoming aware of spiritual realities? Or are you talking more of enlightenment? Using another loaded term. Uh,
Enlightenment.
yeah, the state of having no attachments or desires, right? Or aversions.
I don't define it that way, but I'm talking about enlightenment when I say spiritual awakening.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, which the way I define it is, I mean, I kind of just want to say the awareness of the true nature of being. It's like I almost don't want to make it more complicated than that. But then inevitably it gets more complicated because it's like, well, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
But um the let's see if there's another way I can say it. Give me a minute. In Zen, they always say something, again, like kind of annoying, like in this exact circumstance, it would be like, let's go have some tea. That would be,
Like literally,
yeah, that's
but
it.
like why?
Because there's no point in talking about it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
It's yeah, but for the purpose of speaking and communication,
Sure.
um, what did I say? The awareness of the true nature of being. Yeah. What I want to say is like, I just want to call it a sense of beingness outside of the personality self. And that sense of beingness outside of the personality self has no limits. So it's one with everything. That's how I would define spiritual awakening. But this is where it becomes maybe like more I don't know, practically useful or something, is again, it's not like, to me, the purpose isn't to experience oneness and then just be like, okay, great, done. I'm done now. Don't have to do anything. You know, you can do that. That's like a Ramana Maharshi thing. Like you could go sit in a loincloth for the rest of your life and not say very much and be in bliss. You can do that. Um, but to me, the where it becomes practically applicable for psychotherapy, and why I think it's something that can be worked into psychotherapy, and maybe even is foundationally important to the process, is that it's like you have to, okay, this might be as with everything I've said, might be really confusing, but I'm just gonna go for it. That, you know, I was talking about inner conflict and how you've got these, it's like kind of these two solidified senses of self that that are battling each other all the time. There's the inner conflicts, and that those two things aren't who you really are. Those are just structures of conditioning that fight with each other. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And so there's this process that has to take place where you separate yourself from the contents of your experience. And that's one thing meditation is great for,
Right.
is to really create space where you can start to see, well, first, this is a revelation for a lot of people, that there's actually space between your thoughts. It's not just a constant stream of thought. Thoughts move fast, but your awareness moves faster. And that there's a gap there. And not only is there a gap, in that gap is silence. It's just still silent observation, the nature of awareness. And that not only is it in that gap, but it's actually underneath all thoughts. And the more you observe thought through meditative practice, usually, the more that becomes clear. And you start, again, the gap between the thoughts gets bigger, but also the underlying stillness, the ability to, I really love this meditation where it's like, it's an open, spacious awareness meditation, but the analogy is that you become like a big open sky, and any contents of your experience, thoughts, emotions, sensations, anything, are just like clouds that appear in the sky. And that you can get sucked into a cloud when we're triggered or lost in a thought or whatever. That's what happens. We get sucked into a cloud. And when you're, like, if you think about flying in a plane, you're flying through a cloud, you look out the window, all you see is cloud.
Hmm.
And it looks like it goes on forever, like it'll just never end. And that's the experience of being identified with something, with a thought or a feeling, is that you feel trapped in it and like it'll never end.
Right.
And so yeah, so that we actually have this capacity, because it's a part of the nature of our being, nature of consciousness, that you can pop out of the cloud, or at least be aware that you're in a cloud. Sometimes you can't pop out of it immediately. And then you can be separate from it and observe it. And it's interesting because I'm talking about actually the benefits of separation. And I've been talking about oneness and non-duality, and that's all
Right.
great, but like
Yeah.
actually there's a huge benefit to being able to separate from your experience. But this whole tangent I'm on is like, that is a necessary step. You have to separate from the contents of your experience so that you're not identified with it anymore. And then this other thing can happen where, even though you are separate and observing it, there's this experience of it's the same thing. It's like, this is where language fails me, but it's it appears as if I'm separate from the thought observing it, but I'm the whole thing. I'm the whole play unfolding. I am observer and observed, and what I am is the same thing, and it is in both of those, or it is the animating force of both of those, observed and observer. So what I just said, step one is separating from content of experience. Step two is realizing that those aren't actually separate on a fundamental level. in terms of consciousness or awareness or divine wisdom, perhaps.
Mm.
And then step 3 is more fully embodying the experience of separation.
Interesting.
It's because now,
Because
yeah,
yeah,
you go.
because like step 2 almost sounds like, oh, that's enlightenment, right? Now you're aware of this experience of oneness, that there is no separation at a fundamental level. But then step 3 is coming back to a more, I hate to use the word integrated, but that's the best word, integrated way of being in your body.
Yeah. That's why it's useful. That's why it's important to me, like fundamentally life changing, because it is living your human life fully. And I don't think you can do that when you are seated, your identity is in this like this seat of separation. It's coming from separation. It's approaching life from a separate point of view. A solely separate point of view, dualistic.
Right.
But then again, like we've kind of I just go in circles with with my thoughts, but like to only be non-dual, like to only be one and
Mm.
call that enlightenment, well, that's dual. That's still duality because you're saying you're one and not two.
So could one way of conceptualizing non-dual awareness is holding the tension between I am one with all things, and yet I am a separate entity at the same time.
What you're saying sounds factually correct, but I don't like it.
Damn it. Okay.
No, I mean, I don't think that I think that language has its limitations,
Sure.
but that what you said sounds about as close as you could get to an accurate description. That you're both one and two, so you can you can have an embodied experience of oneness, which almost it sounds contradictory, but it's like you're experiencing both your humanness and your divinity.
Right. Right.
You're experiencing both the all of the things that go along with the appearance of separation and having this underlying awareness that it's all it's all the same. It's all it's all animated by the same force.
Here's how I feel like I understand non-duality, and you can let me know if this is right, wrong, or whatever. Um, the way that I think it's been explained to me is it's like a dream. And when you're caught up in a dream, it seems like, you're almost like unconsciously swept in this dream, this story, and you're this character. And it seems like all the dream characters that are in your dream are separate from you. But then when you wake up, were they really? Because the whole entire dream was you. There were no technically dream characters. They all existed within you. And in fact, the entire dream existed in you as well. Would
Yeah,
that be analogous?
kind of. I think it falls apart at some point, and this is like a spiritual bypassing thing people do, where it becomes um I always butcher the words sol sol
Solipsism?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
solipsistic or whatever,
Yeah.
that it's like I alone am real, and but I'm having a conversation with you. Are you not real? Is that what I'm saying? That you're just generated entirely from my consciousness? And I think my view of it, and we'll probably get more into this type of thing in another episode, but my view of that is that it's a little bit of, it's both and, but there's some sort of complex interplay between conscious beings, and we're all co-creating this reality together. So it's not like a dream exactly where I'll wake up and be like, all of that was fake. It's more like a dream that we're all hanging out together and somehow.
I like that. It's like we're hanging out at the beach.
Yeah, like maybe it's a lucid dream and we're all lucid,
Hmm.
but somehow, yeah, you like we just popped into the same dream space or whatever.
Sure. Sure.
um yeah,
Yeah.
there's like a million other things that I could say about this, but I just want to see what's relevant to this discussion. Bringing it back to psychotherapy. What is psychotherapy?
I completely forgot that was a topic.
We got a little far away. Um, that I believe that it's much like a body, and I'm not a biologist or whatever, but um just thinking about the idea of homeostasis, that if the environment is healthy, the inner environment of the body, that everything functions properly, and healing, it's like a self-healing machine, like we talked about. If it has all the nutrients it needs and all the everything it needs, it's a self-healing machine. um and its nature is homeostasis, and if it goes out of homeostasis, then disease happens, and
Right.
death. and and I think the same is true for our being, for our body mind system, our psyche, whatever you want to call it, that its nature is homeostasis. Its nature is to not be in conflict. And I actually look at animals as a great example of this, because we might have a neocortex that's well developed, but we also have the other aspects of the brain that other mammals have. And when I watch my cats, or I watch any animal, mostly pets are funny. Domesticated animals are funny because we've made them neurotic somehow. But mostly they don't have inner conflict, as far as we can tell. I mean, I'm not in there, so I don't know what's going on exactly, but it's just being, it's just, they're just like fully embodied in themselves. But the difference is they're fused. They're like a baby, or a toddler rather, because I don't think they're totally fused. That it seems to me they have some sense of separation, I guess,
Mhm.
but they're just like there. They're just looking out the window, and everything, my imagination, how I imagine it, is if they have any kind of thoughts, they're very limited. and it's very quiet. They're super still, and they're just aware. They're sensitive. They're just sensitive to the environment and aware of what's happening and in the flow of themselves.
Hmm.
And I think that's our nature. But us as humans, we get the incredible experience of self-awareness and having this more pronounced sense of separation. What are these sounds? Just hearing weird sounds. And uh and so we get this sort of glorious experience of getting to come back to our nature. And that we can actually choose. It's actually a choice. We actually get to choose how how far away from our nature we want to be. But that we have this natural capacity for homeostasis, for self-healing, for getting still and silent and just being fully immersed in the moment, in the flow of my being, whatever that means. And after all this talk of oneness and stuff, I also believe that there's a soul, and the soul is it's apparently a separate thing. You have a soul, I have a soul. They're different essences. They have different flavors, but they come from the same source. But that maybe that's a whole different discussion.
Sure, that kind of opens up some other things. Um, yeah, so I guess from a psychotherapy standpoint, we we go to therapy so we can develop that capacity to choose to embody or embrace our true nature.
Are you asking, or is that what you?
Yeah, asking and I'm doing both, and it's non-dual. I'm asking and telling. Yeah, I guess I was just like letting that statement hang in the air.
My experience, and this goes back to what I said earlier about we were talking about how I stopped spiritual bypassing. I like this way that Adyashanti put it at one point, which is that all of these patterns that we have, they have a limited amount of energy behind them. But when we are unconsciously hooked into them, we're constantly feeding them energy. And so that's why they just seem to go and go and go and go. They don't just stop on their own. You have to do something. But when you do something, maybe it's a hypnotherapy thing, maybe it could be any number of things, any number of healing things, but you do something that disconnects the energy feed there, where you're no longer feeding that pattern. And then at that point, it seems like it has a natural lifespan, and it eventually runs through all of the energy. It circulates and circulates and circulates. And over time, it gets like smaller and smaller and smaller. And then it just stops.
Right.
And I really like that. Why did I say that? We were talking about there was a point I was going somewhere. Oh, you said so the point of going to therapy is um to how did you say it? Experience your
Yeah, it's
true
so
nature.
it's to develop the capacity to choose
Mm.
our true nature.
Oh, okay. Um so what I was going to say is that it seems to me that the way I would say it is that I could say it so many different ways, but it's like God calls me home, or the divine wants me to remember who I am as the divine. And to me, that is like a that is the primary uh, directive force of my healing.
Mhm.
So then it's not something I have control over. I didn't choose to have those experiences that I had that made me, you know, hit rock bottom or really like bottom out with my identity and get humbled. I didn't choose to make that happen. In fact, I was actively trying not to experience that. um, so to me, there's this is and perhaps this is a setup for a longer discussion about this particular thing, but the role of the divine in psychotherapy.
Hmm.
That to me, there's it's like channeling for me. I get with somebody, and a lot of people like in more of like a humanistic approach or something, they say the relationship does the work,
Right.
which I really like that. I really like that. And I think that's largely true. However, to me, what is happening in the relationship is the emergence of divine wisdom guiding the process of healing. I'm not guiding it. The other person is not guiding it. I'm just using my knowledge, skills, wisdom, um, but I'm doing it in a way where like it feels like I'm just opening up to something because I don't know what this person needs to get from point A to point B. Or rather, I don't know what they need to get from point A to point Z. I might have a lot of ideas at least about getting from point A to point B or point A to point C. I've got lots of thoughts about things, but to me, there's this greater intelligence just baked into the fabric of life, and that shows up in the psychotherapeutic relationship. And so, like, I will say, for example, I will say something that's totally wrong. I'll give some interpretation of like, well, sounds like you're saying this. And then they're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this. And then it takes the conversation in a completely new direction that I couldn't have predicted and didn't actually have any control over. But then we end up getting somewhere and we get into some important nuances to untangle certain knots. But again, it's like I I don't control that process. I think that we're both an active participant in it,
Hmm.
but there's something else there. And so I'm saying that because relating it back to my own experience of, I also believe that's just true in life, that it's like I'm a co-creative participant in the process. I can try different things. I can try different modalities. I can learn. But ultimately, for me, and why I think you and I, um, put different emphases on different things, is that for me, I've seen myself. It's like there was no way for me to approach modalities without reifying the part of me that felt like something was fundamentally wrong with me. But now I can do that most of the time. Um, but yeah, but so again, it's like that's why I think that the spiritual awakening piece, or this realization of what we really are, is actually so helpful to the process, because then you can you can learn how to surrender, or like we said in a different conversation, it's like you're surfing. There's like these waves that come in life, and the wave is an opportunity to transform something, or transmute something, or grow in a particular way, or heal something, whatever. But it's a wave that's completely out of your control, because it's just the ocean doing it.
Hmm.
But if you're paying attention in a particular way, and you know that you are you are this ocean, then you can like sense the wave forming and ride it in a particular way. If you don't have that awareness, then to me, it feels like you're trying to generate your own waves of healing, which maybe works sometimes.
No, I agree with a lot of that.
And this
I'm
sorry,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I think I would just maybe word it differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is why, to me, psychotherapy is an art. It's way more, to me, it's way more an art than a science. But art can include science. Science can't include art, or
Hmm.
at least the totality of art. It could include a little bit of it, but art can include the
But
totality of science and go beyond it. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense to me, but I'm like, does that actually make any sense?
uh can you repeat it?
Yeah, well, I'd say it like this, like science and math, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
are structured, and they are replicable,
Yeah.
formulaic.
Yeah.
And art can be structured, replicable, and formulaic. So it can
Yes.
include math and science in it, but then it can also spread out to infinity,
Right.
get as abstract as you want to be.
Sure. Sure.
And that to me is psychotherapy. It's like people have been trying to reduce it to a science. And the tricky thing is, it's not completely not a science, that you can approach it in a formulaic way and get good results sometimes, but it's limited. Doing it that way is limited. And if you want deeper transformation, if you want the deepest possible satisfaction and fulfillment in life, you want the least amount of suffering, then it has to become art,
Hmm.
because art is channeling. people that perform, that engage in art at the highest levels, who aren't totally full of themselves, most of them will admit that it's like something, I opened up and something came through me.
Hmm.
It's not, I'm not responsible for this art piece.
Right.
But you still have to have a certain level of skill and awareness in order to be used as a channel.
Yes. So, and this is where maybe we disagree, or maybe we don't, but I do think there is a time and a place for building these skill set. It's kind of like if you're improvising on drums or guitar, like you still like at some when you start out, you're like learning the scales, right? Or I don't know, with the drums, the different patterns for drums. But then at some point, and it takes work and it takes practice. But then at some point, once you get all the fundamentals down, then when you're on the stage, then you can improvise, and it becomes this art. So there is like, yeah, like you said, like there's the science to it. You have to practice the scales and the music theory and all that stuff, and then once you build the competency and get the skills, then there's a flow.
Mhm.
So I do think that can be analogous to psychotherapy in a way, and I think there's a whole movement that I would like to be a part of, um, that is taking the idea of deliberate practice, just like you would deliberately practice the drums. You would deliberately practice these different like psychotherapy skills.
Yeah. I was just thinking back on my life, and I think I did that. It didn't, I don't know. I think the, I have a little bit of resistance to this idea because just like anything, any kind of skill or practice, we could be more or less rigid about it. And I don't think, hmm, I don't know how to say that. It's like, okay, so I'm a drummer, and I started playing when I was like 13, and I took lessons from the beginning. And so there was specific structured stuff that I was like working on, and that was totally necessary, just like you said, like absolutely. Um, but also I had fun hitting the drums. And I guess I really, maybe I overemphasize this because I think that there's been an overemphasis in the other direction. And so I'm like reacting to that. But I there's a part of me that wants to emphasize an unstructured and fun approach. Um, and maybe I do that too much. I don't know. But also, like listening to what you're saying, I thought about times with clients where I I forgot about the structure. And so I was like working on an abstract art piece, and then something happened, like someone was in an IOP program or something, an intensive outpatient program, and they were given some skills. They were going through, it sounded like some DBT skills or something. And then they brought them into therapy, and they were like, this is like so helpful. They were going over the skills, and then I was like, oh shit, I didn't even realize that you didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so that was a moment where, yeah, it was like, okay, I can see, to immediately jump into trying to paint some crazy abstract art piece, there might need to be some foundational basics here.
Right. Right. And that's a good message for me too, because I feel like that's a weak point on my end. And I have
What?
a different model since I'm not currently, in an associate or a licensed clinician. So I'm not doing that in that capacity. So I have a slightly different business model, and which influences the way I do my sessions as well.
Hmm.
So
Wait, were you saying it was a good reminder for you because you
it's the business model that I have as a hypnotist and a coach, legally I'm a coach, right? Um, is that my content is my psychoeducation, and hopefully I help people take them from zero, from basic to wherever, right? So then they kind of understand my framework and how I'm doing things. And that way, once we're in a session, I'm not necessarily just rehashing all the stuff in my content. Hopefully, now they have an understanding, they have a basic framework, and then I can work with them. Just, we can just go dive straight into it. So I guess, but I think that would be different for a licensed clinician.
Hmm.
And you definitely have a different clientele, right?
Potentially, I think about that too, just getting my website set up and whatnot to just have a bunch of information
Mm-hmm.
available, and then maybe depending on, if we're about to, like, this is some information to review before the first session, and this is maybe at session 5 or 10, this might be some good information around that time, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I tend to lean maybe too much in the direction of an unstructured approach in this realm of art. Um, but then again, like I said before, I think that the art can include structure and
Yeah.
science and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it should, because otherwise, like, there has to be some measure of progress. But
Yeah.
but that's also kind of the tricky thing when we're defining what psychotherapy is. And, like, for example, insurance companies are wanting to use these particular measures of depression and anxiety to measure progress. But then to me, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It almost means nothing. And that, how do you measure a change in the relationship to oneself?
I mean, I guess I'm playing devil's advocate, right? You could
Uh-huh.
you could have things like, I love my self on a scale of 1 through 10. How much do you love yourself? How much do you accept the parts of you that you previously didn't want to accept? Or I'm sure there's things that a psychometrician can come up with, but
Yeah, but it
yeah.
just it just gets so fuzzy. It's like, okay, so my inner child still to this day sometimes can feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with me.
Hmm.
But then I love myself, and I can be loving with my inner child. And so if you're asking me how much I love myself, is that really an indicator of how much I'm suffering? Because I could be loving myself and still suffering.
Sure. Sure.
So I
But yeah.
we yeah, we could
Yeah.
I think we can develop better measures. I just don't think they exist right now.
Hmm.
Or if they do, I'm not particularly
Aware.
aware of them.
Yeah.
Um yeah. So maybe to start wrapping this up, and I think this might be just an ongoing conversation, and maybe that's kind of what this podcast is about, is exploring this idea of what psychotherapy is and what healing is, and what it means to become whole, this whole thing, our the title here. Um, and that it's not like I feel like we haven't exactly answered the question of what psychotherapy is, but I think we, it's taking shape. And I think that's part of the thing is like there are assumptions in the field today about what it is and what it isn't. And I think that it's an ever evolving thing and we're discovering what it can be.
I don't know. I feel like ask me another time. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that it's like it has been a certain way in the past. It is currently a particular way, and there's a lot of ways that it is, depending on what therapist you are and what modality you work in, what your framework is, all that stuff. But I think we're also discovering, I mean, we don't even know what the self is. So if it's about decreasing suffering for the self, then that's like my whole jam is like, well, what the hell is that?
Right.
That's why I think it's important to explore that. But also, you can decrease suffering. We could just remove self from the picture. You can decrease suffering without addressing that, which I think was your
Yeah.
point earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, like, is it really necessary?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess maybe that's my point is that how did people do it without that? It's not to say that that's going to work for everybody. Uh, but yeah, I'm sorry. I'm finding it hard to think,
You hit
and it's not.
the
I
brain
don't know
dead point.
what. It's weird because I feel alert, but it's also just like this. Oh, I see. Okay, there's a part of me that's been popping up. Yeah, it's a part of me that's kind of clouding my thinking. So,
Tell me more.
oh God, I don't want this to turn into a therapy session. I don't know. This is there's a new part that I haven't uh encountered before. I don't think so. Okay. Okay. It's not really trying to protect me or anything. It's just telling me it's interesting. It's telling me that uh it's just wanting me to be aware of my limit. Hmm. I mean, I don't feel like particularly emotionally tired, but I mean a tiny bit. But I guess this part of me just kind of wants me to just take a break or something. Take a break, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we hit the brain dead point like
Okay.
20 minutes ago.
Okay.
um, so there's something else I wanted to say to wrap things up. Well, anyway, so the point being like this exploration of what psychotherapy is. Oh yeah, that's kind of I was saying all that stuff about what it has been, what it is, what it could be, blah blah blah. But I think we're just this is a discovery process and that it's like we need to know what I'm just gonna stop talking. I think we should stop talking.
Let's have a cup of tea, right? Let's
Uh-huh.
go for tea. Yeah. Yeah.
um
Cool.
yeah, so we'll keep exploring a lot of these things in future episodes.